Oh, the only question is, are we going to make Brent Simmons angry with the comma splice? And here I am on my battery. You can make it a semicolon. You can make it a period. If you leave it as a comma, it's a comma splice. But I feel like it's an informal. And since it is someone speaking, you could consider it someone speaking. Sometimes people speak in things that are not sentences.
I definitely would not do a semicolon because that just is wrong. I mean, I know it's grammatically right, but I just hate them.
You just hate, like, as on principle, like, ever?
Not never, but it takes a lot for me to use a semicolon. Like, it needs to be
What-
really, really worth it.
What does it take?
It has to really be the right thing to use there, and like there have to be no good alternatives. Like that's when I really rarely use semicolons because I don't like them.
So then it'd be period. Here I am, period. But anyway, I just leave it as a comma. Like,
well, but it has to be two periods. It has to be here I am, period. I'm a battery, period.
yeah, but we don't put periods in the title. So yeah, so we'll just leave the comma in there. We'll just dare Brent to yell at us about it. Go ahead, come and get us.
The entire internet wrote in to tell us that there is already a lightning to headphone jack adapter, which is not at all useful if you're anywhere other than your desk. But in the defense of the entire internet, we were talking mostly about using this sort of adapter at work as you listen to podcasts or music all day long. Apple sells a lightning to headphone jack adapter with pass-through lightning for charging. It's the $40 lightning dock, which I believe came out recently, didn't it?
But that's got like a DAC in it, and that's for like the digital, the headphones that take digital audio over the lightning port. Like that's not really relevant to what we were discussing, which was if they replaced the headphone jack with the lightning port and still wanted to support regular plain old analog headphones with an adapter that did not require, any signal conversion or anything. That would just, be a metal pass-through to the audio pins of the headphone. And that's not what the lightning dock does.
So how would you describe lightning dock instead then?
It is basically a thing to let you both plug in the current crop of lightning compatible headphones and also a charger at the same time.
Fair enough. One way or another, this is not the sort of thing that we would expect one to take running around with them as they're trying to use it to adapt lightning to a regular headphone jack. This would serve the purpose for desk use, but not for mobile use. And that's mostly what we were talking about last episode. But yes, we wanted to publicly acknowledge on behalf of the entire internet who wrote into us that we are aware that this exists. So Eric Michaels Ober had a little bit of feedback with regard to why else you would want to use the lightning port for audio. He pointed out that noise-canceling headphones don't need their own battery or any other charging mechanism because they can just draw power right off the lightning port, much like the Apple Pencil does.
Which you may or may not want. Like, do you really want your noise-canceling headphones sucking power from your phone? Maybe, maybe not.
Well, we have all this extra battery power on the phones. Might as well use it for other purposes.
So much is practically bursting out of the phone. There's so much battery power.
Well played, sir. We'll get there. All right. And then I have no idea who we're attributing this to.
MX, good old MX.
Okay. And he or she said that USB Type-C already supports analog audio. Check out Appendix A in the spec, and we will link to the spec in the show notes. John, I believe you've bolded some passages here. Would you like to share that with the group?
Yeah, the spec, by the way, is a PDF. Like, we're linking to the page that has the PDF on it, so you can just download the PDF and find this. But in Appendix A,
sounds fun.
Yeah, you will find out that the reason this comes up is because last time I said one of the advantages of Lightning is that if Apple wants to add support for plain old analog audio, either by adding those two weird side contacts that I seem to remember seeing somewhere and I still can't find, or just by repurposing the pins, because the whole deal with Lightning is you can use the different pins for different purposes. It's not sort of hardwired, so to speak, to do a particular thing. That Apple has the flexibility to do. They don't have to wait for the USB committee or whatever to agree, but it turns out USB-C already supports analog audio. I should have figured that since it's an old standard. If you have your USB-C connector in audio adapter accessory mode, it just takes a certain number of pins in the USB and uses them for the same exact signals that go over 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So that's already supported in USB-C. And by the way, the other thing I found out about USB-C relevant to our conversation last time about whether Apple was all in on Lightning or whether they were going to eventually switch to USB-C, USB-C is bigger than Lightning. This shows how many USB-C devices I have in my house. I'm pretty sure I have 0. Maybe I have 1. I don't know about it somewhere. But anyway, I don't have an idea of what they're like. But looking it up online afterwards, USB-C is slightly bigger. And that pretty much dooms Apple to ever switch to it because they're going to be like, well, Lightning is smaller, so why would we ever switch to that thing? So I think we're in it for the long haul for Lightning, even though USB-C apparently already supports analog audio. And you could definitely make that passive connector thing for old-style headphones if you were using USB-C.
Excellent. Speaking of USB, and in this case USB 3, we are now getting USB 3 speeds from the new Lightning to SD card camera reader that came out just in the last couple of days as we record. And for the iPad Pro, you get USB 3 speeds on that. And that's pretty exciting. I've never actually used one of these. Do you guys have one of them?
I have the USB one, which I use for like audio purposes, which is actually, it's like this totally undocumented thing that it can do. You can plug in a lot of USB audio interfaces to it and have different sound inputs or outputs for your iOS devices. And that actually has worked on iPhones and iPads basically forever. But my father-in-law used the SD card one for a little while on his iPad. It was fine. It was okay.
The thing that interests me most about these USB 3 speeds on the iPad Pro is for people like me, maybe I'm rare in this, who still hook up their iOS devices to one of their big computers and do an encrypted local backup instead of just relying on the iCloud backup. It takes so long to do it at USB 2 speeds. So if I could get USB 3 speeds when doing a local backup to my computer through iTunes, I would really appreciate that, even for my dinky 32 and 64 gig devices, let alone if we got like a 128 gig iPad Pro. So I'm assuming you have one, Marco. I'm assuming if you were to hook it up to your Mac with the USB cable, it would still be USB 2 speeds?
As far as I know, because I think all the existing Lightning to USB cables, I think, are all USB 2 cables.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's doable yet, but hopefully over time that'll be solved just in time for people to stop ever syncing their things to their computers.
Well, I don't know if you want to ever stop, because like as people who have ever restored from iCloud can attest, it's such a super pain.
Oh yeah, I will still do it, and Tiff will still do it, but I think we are already in the extreme minority there.
But anyway, that's the accessory they need to release. Forget about this whole, like the whole exciting thing was like, wow, the Lightning port supports USB 3 speeds, but only on the iPad Pro, and surely that will trickle down and that'll be great. But I don't want an SD card reader. I want a thing that plugs into my computer for it.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I actually put this on my Christmas list for this year. I don't know if I would necessarily... It's a great gift because it's the sort of thing I wouldn't necessarily buy for myself, but hey, if somebody handed it to me, that'd be pretty awesome. And the reason I want one is because there are probably going to come times when I'm traveling with our Micro Four Thirds camera. I didn't decide to bring a laptop with me, and I only have my iPad. And I could connect the camera to the iPad by way of Wi-Fi, but it's actually surprisingly slow to do it that way. And so I think it would be a lot easier to just pull the SD card out of the camera and attach it to the iPad or phone for that matter and suck some pictures off of there that way in order to, post on Instagram or maybe just send to friends or family or what have you. So I'm curious to see if I end up getting this for Christmas. And if I do, I'll report back. But I agree with you, Marco, by and large, that it's not a lot of people that would want this, but I kind of want one because I think it would be useful.
It's kind of a testament to the crappiness of wireless. We talked about the last show about is Wi-Fi above the level of flakiness, but how many people use Wi-Fi syncing to iTunes? Maybe that's not, you can't blame Wi-Fi for that. You can just blame iTunes because there's so much. But even with cameras, so many cameras have Wi-Fi. Or remember that stupid iFi thing, it was the SD card with Wi-Fi built in or whatever.
And then it's like desktop Linux. Like the next, this one, the new model we just made is finally the good one, and it never is.
for the cameras that have built-in Wi-Fi support, that's what you want. You want that, and you also want it to work. But
you want it until you try it.
Yeah, I know. But what's the problem? Wi-Fi itself, technologically speaking, is an okay technology. We all use wireless devices all around our house, and they more or less maintain the connection, and we get reasonable speeds based on what we think the signal strength is. And yet when we have a super expensive camera 30 inches away from a super expensive iPad, the best way we have to talk to them is to open up the camera in a little waterproof or water resistant compartment, pull out this tiny little card, plug this little thing into the lightning port, shove the little, it's just, you're right there, guys. You both have radios. You both, what's the problem here? Is it because camera manufacturers don't know how to do Wi-Fi stacks? I don't know what the deal is, but it's sad.
Well, they all have their own apps, basically. It's like my camera has built-in Wi-Fi finally. It took me years to finally get one that had that. And but in order to use it, I have to install Sony's dumb app on my phone, which works about a third of the time. And when you do finally get it to work, you kind of regret that you got it to work because it's just so mediocre and so slow. And it's it actually would have been faster to just take the car out of the camera and shove it into this thing than it is to do the Wi-Fi thing.
Yeah, but that feels barbaric, though, taking
It does.
things apart and putting them together.
I feel like I'm using a VCR, but it's faster.
I completely agree. My Olympus, it isn't the app is relatively reliable, but it is astonishingly slow to transfer pictures between the camera and the phone or the iPad, and it's very, very frustrating. Now, the app is nice in that for general things, like it'll let me geotag based on what the phone is doing. So it'll take a log of all the places I go and all the timestamps and whatnot, and then it'll send those to the phone and then geotag all the pictures on the phone, or excuse me, send those to the camera, and it'll geotag all the pictures on the camera, which I really like on the occasions where I'm not just staying put somewhere. And it also lets you do like a remote viewfinder sort of thing. So much like you can with the watch and the phone, it'll let you take pictures remotely, which is really nice if you're too socially awkward to say to somebody, hey, can you take our picture? But I cannot say enough how awfully slow it is to transfer pictures. And because of that, I agree with you, Marco. I just end up taking the damn card out of the camera and putting it in a computer. All right. And we have some good news this week. Our long national nightmare is over. And we now have an Apple remote app for iOS that works with the new Apple TV, which would be more exciting to me if I had a new Apple TV.
Well, we don't have my understanding, I haven't tested this, but my understanding is it's not as if they released a new version of their remote app that works with Apple TV. It's the opposite. They released a new version of the Apple TV OS that makes the existing remote app work with it. Is that correct, based on your understanding or experimentation?
Oh, I didn't try it.
I thought that was correct.
I mean, I think they did eventually release a new remote app as well, but I think before they even released the new remote app, what I read was that if you just updated the TV OS, your remote app would work with it even before they released the eventual remote app update.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, it's too late for all of us for the setup stuff. And there's still promises of like the real remote app that's going to, let you swipe around on your phone like the touchpad and use the accelerometers and just basically be a full-fledged replacement for the new Apple TV remote rather than just, please, for the love of God, give us an on-screen keyboard that we can type on with our fingers instead of having to swipe back and forth on the number line or the letter line or whatever the hell we're calling that thing.
So interestingly, for whatever it's worth, we recently bought a PS4, meaning yesterday. So I got a chance to try, what is a current, recent-ish effort at a regular on-screen keyboard by using Sony's little dumb thing. Before I realized that you could just plug in a USB keyboard. About halfway through the process, I realized that. But for the first half of the process, I was just using their little built-in thing. And just using the built-in keyboard with their controller and the D-pad and a couple of buttons on the shoulder buttons to do done and delete and stuff. My God, it's so much better. Like, I was able to enter text so much faster in this regular on-screen keyboard using a regular D-pad that I had never used before than I still am today on the new Apple TV that I've been using now for like a month or something.
Let me give you a pro tip. Do not use the D-pad. I can't believe you suffer through like a barbarian using the D-pad to pick from the keyboard. You get one finger or thumb on the touchpad on the PS4 controller and one finger or thumb on the X button to select.
Wait, there's a touchpad?
Way faster. Oh my God, is it so much faster?
Wait, what is that? Is that the big gray rectangle in the middle?
Yeah, it's the big thing in the middle of the controller.
I had no idea that was a touchpad.
You'll find out in games that it is as well. But anyway,
no, I won't. Tiff might.
It is so much easier because it's not a great trackpad. It's like the one on Casey's Dell. It's a crappy one, but it's so much better than going down, down, right, up, down, down, because you can basically just go mousing around and go tap, 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 tap. It just feels so much more freeing than being constrained by the grid like you're in a Tron game trying to play light cycles to get around the keyboard.
Well, honestly, I mean, I think what made it so much faster for me, rather than the way the Apple TV one is done, besides the fact that it had more than one row, Apple, but I think what made it so much faster is that you can kind of just, when you have this digital input method of the D-pad, you can just know, all right, go over 4, up 2, you can just do it. It's so precise that I was able to flip through things really quickly on that, and way more accurately. I think I made one mistake in the entire setup process. On Apple TV, I constantly hit the wrong letter. Constantly.
Yeah, and the other good thing is they're sort of smart auto suggestion stuff, kind of like the the stuff from Android that Apple copied in iOS. Like above the keyboard, a series of words appears. Right, or like when I'm sending messages to people related to Destiny, I basically type the first letter of a word, and it knows which word I'm trying to write, and then I just select it from the pre-selected things and type the next first letter. and then select it from the pre-selected setup, because I don't send a lot of messages. I should just hook up a keyboard because it's so painful to try to do it with the pad. But the auto correction thing, when you don't say a lot through the interface, the 7 words you do say are always the first suggestion. So it's pretty good. But you definitely do check out the touchpad. It's a little bit awkward to hold it. So you're like, wait, so I have my thumb on the touchpad and then my other thumb on the X button to select the key. Isn't that kind of weird? And how do I hit the shoulders? But trust me, it's really great.
Fair enough. And then you have a correction, I believe, John, from last episode.
Yeah, I made an offhand mark about the about Swift and Foundation and getting rid of the NS prefix. How currently you can a lot of the APIs you can use Swift strings and NS strings, and they will convert between each other. And I referred to that as like a free bridging thing, or toll free bridging, or a zero cost bridging, or whatever. It's not zero cost. Swift and Foundation bridging is not toll free. I was thinking of the toll free bridging between Core Foundation and Foundation. Too many freaking words have Foundation in them. But anyway, just to clear that up.
We're sponsored this week by Backblaze. Go to backblaze.com/ATP for unlimited, unthrottled online backup for just $5 a month. Backblaze, look, I love them. I use them. This is online backup. You need online backup. It is such a great insurance policy against all sorts of possible problems that could happen. Losses, fires, floods, theft, computer problems, corruption, just human error. There's all sorts of problems that can affect you that you need backups. And if you're going to have backups, you should have more than one backup. My preferred solution here is to have 1 or 2 local backups. Time Machine is a great example. Time Machine is very useful. So things like Super Duper clones. But there's always a need for something off-site, something that is automatically sending your files somewhere else, somewhere secure, and that is what Backblaze offers. I have tried many other cloud backup providers. I've always come back to Backblaze as being the best I have seen by a long shot. They have over 150 petabytes of customer data backed up. They've restored over 10 billion files to their customers, and you can access your data anywhere. So I actually recently did this. Because this is online backup, they have an online copy of all your files. You can do things like retrieve a file when you're on vacation. If you need if you need to get to a file that's only on your computer at home, you can use Backblaze to get it wherever you are by using their mobile app for iOS or Android. It is a fantastic service. I use it. My wife uses it. My mom uses it. So many people use Backblaze. It is fantastic. I highly recommend it. All this, you get online backup with all those features, all the security, all the peace of mind that online backup can provide for just $5 a month per computer. And that no matter how many files you have, this is truly unlimited, $5 a month. I have, I think, 3 terabytes from my computer. My wife has something like 5 terabytes from hers. It is incredible. All this unlimited storage, any directly connected drive is included in your backup for just $5 a month. And it's unthrottled upload speeds. They'll take your files as fast as you will let them take them. It is great. Love Backblaze. Go to backblaze.com/ATP for the best online backup I've ever used.
Excellent. All right. So Apple released a thing this week, and everyone's upset about it. I kind of am too. You guys. They have released the iPhone 6S Smart Battery Case Panamera.
This is unfair to the Panamera, because the Panamera has a fairly continuous curve over the back of the car. It's big and it's awkwardly shaped in profile, but it's not as if this is closer to the bangle trunk on the 7 Series. Remember that one?
Yeah, that's fair.
This looks like they just shipped an engineering prototype.
Yeah, it kind of does.
They were assigned, hey, can you make this like this weekend? Just make something that works. And somebody got the wrong memo and shipped it as a real product.
All right, so let's describe this for people who are listening to the show far disconnected in time. Imagine an iPhone 6S with Apple silicone case on it.
With 20% battery life, because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Give it a chin. So take the battery case and extend it downwards a little bit. And so like that it's got an extra chin hanging off. Don't worry about why for now. And then on the back of the phone, take like, I don't know, maybe 15 playing cards from a deck of cards, put it in there, and then slather it with silicone again. So, in other words, there's a lump on the back of this phone shaped like a rectangle, like a rounded rectangle, that is smaller than the back of the phone. It is both narrower than the phone and significantly shorter than the phone. So there are edges of what look like just a plain old iPhone 6S in a silicone case with a chin poking out all around this thing. And it looks very strange because most other battery cases, most other third-party battery cases that I've seen, try to put like a sort of smooth hump on the back of the thing. Either they try to just make it to be really thin and make it look like, is that actually a battery case, or is that just like a really thick case and you can't even tell? Or you can totally tell and it looks like a bar of soap, but it's essentially a smooth curve over the entire back surface of the phone, top to bottom, left to right edge. And this is the first battery case I can think of that does not do that does not try to make a big curve over the back, and also doesn't try to be so thin it looks like it's not a battery case. It looks like there's a rectangular thing hiding inside the back of your iPhone case.
Yeah.
It's bad.
So when you guys say it's bad, what you're saying is it's ugly. Is that what you're basically getting at?
Well, yeah. I mean,
yes.
If somebody would have told you ahead of time that, hey, Apple's going to make a battery case, what you would imagine in your head would be very different than this, because like we expect Apple stuff to be at minimum decent looking, oftentimes at the expense of functionality these days, which is unfortunate, but obviously you expect thinness, you expect, kind of smooth lines, nice curves, kind of minimal design aesthetic. And this is none of those things. It's like, it doesn't look anything like Apple designed it. If you would have seen this in a weird store window on the streets of Manhattan, you would have assumed it was a knockoff. Like it does not look like an Apple product. And in the world of battery cases, there is no option in a battery case that doesn't look like crap in some way. They all look like crap in some way.
What about the really thin ones? The ones that are like, you can't even tell they're a battery case practically. It just looks like it might just be a thick regular case. I think those look pretty good, with one exception that I'll get to in a second when I tell you about what I think of the aesthetics of this thing. But I think it's you can't say that they're all ugly. Like, a lot of them do make the phone bigger, but the really thin ones that just give you like a little bit more battery, I think some of them look pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right, and by the way, those usually give more battery than this. But anyway, there are some that look okay in Amazon pages. Like there's an Anchor Ultra Slim that, like, if you look in the Wall Street Journal by a review of this by Joanna Stern, there was a picture of three of them next to each other. There was the Apple one, there was one from Anchor, and I think there was a Mophie, or there was some other one in the middle. And you would think that in the review of the Apple battery case, in a comparison photo next to these like way cheaper, way higher capacity cases from these brands that are not known for great design, especially like Anchor, known for being very utilitarian and being good value, but not exactly for like stunningly good design. You would assume that the Apple option in that photo should obviously be the best looking one, and you'd probably assume that it would be the most expensive, and you'd be right. You'd probably assume it wouldn't have the best capacity, and you'd be right. But to see it not even be the best looking one, while also being the most expensive and having the worst capacity, I think is disappointing, to say the least. And that's not to say that you can't. That isn't to say that they could have done a massively better job as a battery case with their goals in mind. And we'll talk about their goals in a minute, because we've gotten a little bit more information since it was released. But it sure does seem like I don't know. They were given a hard problem, but it seems like a very disappointing output to that hard problem. And all of this is underscored by my base level frustration of this shouldn't even be necessary for most people. Like, because the capacity that it has, I think it's roughly 1,800 milliamp hours. So it by most of the reviews, it can charge the phone about 80% of the way, maybe. So it isn't a full additional charge, but it's like you can drain the phone down most of the way, and then you can charge it back up most of the way back up. Honestly, when I need an extra battery, I don't usually need more than that. Like, that is a good amount for me. But people who buy battery cases today, that's like the smallest you can get, and there's a lot of much bigger options where you can get like 2 to 4 times the battery capacity in other battery cases. So it depends on how you're using the phone. If you're doing like GPS all day as part of your job, then I could see you needing a lot more. But honestly, in my use, I complain a lot about the iPhone having not quite enough battery life and being too thin, and them seemingly prioritizing thinness and lightness over usable batteries. But the difference between what the 6 and the 6S have the difference between what they have and what I need is not that big. I would be very, very happy if they took the battery of the 6S and just made it like 25 or 30% bigger, at most 50% bigger. Like that's all it needs. It doesn't need to be 3 times as large. It needs almost what it has, but just add 25 to 50% more. That's what it really needs from me. And from people I've seen in real life, people I've talked to, it seems like that would cover way more people's needs than like, getting anything giant or the status quo. Now, obviously, Apple has way more data than I do, although honestly, I question the metrics they collect and how well that covers the real world usage. But anyway, that's a different discussion. I'm just very sad that Apple's response to the 6S having poor enough battery life for enough people that this was necessary to make and release, that they take that indicator and they say, well, the right answer here is that. Like that case is the right answer to this problem. Rather than if you just put in a battery that's like 25% bigger to begin with, then the additional mass and complexity and efficiency of using that extra battery power is a tiny fraction of the bulk and the mass and the complexity of this case, because you don't have an extra casing around it. You don't have extra framing for rigidity in the middle section. You don't have whatever the heck that passive antenna thing is they're talking about. I have no idea what that is. You don't have that. You don't have the charging circuitry, the discharging circuitry, like the reporting back to the phone of your battery level, and then having two different battery bars and notification center to worry about. It's so much simpler if you just make the battery 25% bigger in the phone, and you cover so much more with that kind of approach. And I know they don't do that because they want it to be thinner and lighter, and they think they're making the right decision, and maybe they are, but it's frustrating to be on my side of it when you think they're not, and this is their solution to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was thinking about it, and do you remember that sort of cheesy but also sort of entertaining video they showed before WWDC 2013 with like the dancing blobs of ink, and it was the 1,000 No's video? Well, I went and found a copy on YouTube, which we'll link in the show notes. That video starts as follows. If everyone is busy making everything, how can anyone perfect anything? I feel like I have nothing more to say now.
That's a mouthful.
Well, it is a mouthful, but I mean, we've been talking a lot about how spread thin we assume Apple to be these days. Now, I think we're generally referring to software when we're talking about that, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more products in Apple's portfolio today than there were in 2013, and I feel like this is just an example of somebody just phoning it in. And maybe I'm missing the boat, but geez, this thing looks just ugly. It's not smooth. I mean, it's smooth, but it's not. It's just bulbous, and it's just, ugh.
I mean, honestly, if I were to get a battery case, I would consider this one simply because I like the feel of Apple's first-party cases. Especially the silicone ones. I like their feel over the buttons, the sleep wake and the volume buttons and everything. They do feel good over the buttons, and they do fit well, and all the other ones look pretty good. This one, not so much, but I appreciate the value of Apple's cases most of the time. But for me, honestly, especially when you look at cost, like the first time you buy one of these battery cases, you're like, oh yeah, this will make sense. I'll use it every other day and it'll be great. And then as soon as the next iPhone comes out and it's a different size and you can't use it anymore, you're like, oh, why did I buy that $100 battery case that now is worthless to me? And after that, you typically just buy like the little USB blocks or bricks or other ways to boost your battery after that, because you realize like, oh, that was kind of not a great use of my money. So now I've moved on to these little battery bricks and thin little rectangles and stuff that have battery power in them. I'll link to my favorite one in the show notes. It's $25 and it has more power than the Apple thing, but by I think twice as much and fits in your pocket. Anyway, I don't know. I feel like these things are just admitting failure, and I also feel like if you look at them cynically, it's very easy to look at this and say, I think they just made this to get $100 more out of people, and they buy phones that were previously going to third-party makers like Mophie and Anker and everyone else. Like, it seems like Apple just wants to capture more of the iPhone accessory revenue for themselves.
So, John, what do you think of this?
You guys are too new to the Apple world, I think, to get the obvious. Let's go back and find something that Apple said in the past that makes them look foolish in the present. You were close when you were going back to the, let's not make too many things, but you have to go back farther to the what I call the flower iMac, not the flower power one, but the one that was on the cover of Time magazine that had basically looks like a little hemisphere with like a metal arm poking out of it and the screen floating on the metal arm. You guys remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So at the introduction to that, Steve Jobs was like, we wanted to make a flat panel iMac because flat panels are cool and they're the future. And we were trying to come up with designs. I don't know if this was in the keynote or in an interview or whatever, but the story was basically, we thought about taking a flat screen and shoving the guts of the iMac onto the back of it. And that just seemed ridiculous because it was like this big lumping thing jammed onto the back of the screen and it wasn't elegant. And so look at the solution we came up with. This was, I think, maybe the first let every element be true to itself thing. Like the base is the base. It hugs the ground. It's low to the ground. It's a semicircle. It's like, boom, there, you're the base. And the screen, we like flat screens because they're flat. They're thin and light. So let the screen be true to itself, be light and airy, like floating in the air. You can reposition it because it's on this cool arm. That arm totally was cool. I love that arm. And it's super thin because, I mean, not by today's standards. Like if you look at the screen on a MacBook Pro, they didn't even know what thin was. But anyway, this is a long time ago. Look how thin it is, and it doesn't have all the guts strapped to the back of it. Of course, today, when they eventually did like the iMac G5 and the big, the white flat screen thing, eventually they did shove the innards of the iMac to the back of the screen when they got it to the point where they felt like they could shove the innards on the back and not have it look like a big, hunchback type thing, right? So here we are with the battery case. And unfortunately, there's not really any place else for the battery to go. You can't put it on the front. You can't really put it on the sides or the bottom. So it's kind of got to go on the back. But when I first saw this, what I tweeted about it was the sort of Johnny Ive, Steve Jobs explanation for this still kind of fits with the let each element be true to itself, right? So the phone is one element and the battery is the other. And it's like, let's not hide the fact that we're jamming a battery on the back of a phone. So the phone is this skinny little thing, and we're going to put a battery on the back of it, and the battery is this other thing, but it's a separate thing. So rather than trying to blend them together and make you think these are all one piece, we're going to, it's either you can decide it's like in script writing parlance, hang a lantern on it, or in the Johnny Ive, Steve Jobs parlance, let each element be true to itself. So this lithium-ion battery pack on the back of this phone is being true to itself by going, here I am, I'm a battery, I'm sticking out here, say hi to me. And, like aesthetically, because that's what it comes down to. Aesthetically speaking, you can decide that looks ugly, maybe because it looks different than the other things, or maybe because just like, I don't want you to declare yourself I don't want you to be true to yourself, battery. I want you to minimize yourself. I don't want to know you're there. I want to pretend instead that I have Marco's phone that he talked about, that is actually just an iPhone 6S that has a little more battery power. And by calling attention to itself in this way that some people find ugly, it's like, oh, it's really rubbing it in that I have this extra thing shoved to the back of my phone that was used to be nice and elegant, and now it's like a little hunchback thing. That's kind of gross. But so I could see arguments on both sides of that, but my opinion of this case started to fall two things. One, when I saw that it had a chin, because I thought surely the company that can make this without a chin is Apple, right? Because the chin is really, I find that substantially alters the feel of the phone more than making it thicker. Once you start making it longer and wider, I don't like the chins. The chins come with compromises, as people have found out. If you buy a Beats headphone, you cannot plug it into the chin of this thing without an adapter because the little headphone jack is just too deep to go through the little adapter-y things.
It's not just Beats, John. There are other headphones.
I know, but I'm just saying, I'm pulling out Beats because it's like Apple makes those, right? So it's the worst. It's not like, oh, third-party headphones. Nope. Essentially, first-party headphones also don't fit. The earpods fit, right? But not, headphones with longer jacks on. They had to make the little tunnel for the sound come out, which is, I'm glad they did that, and the little, the little holes and tunnels they have to make to get the stuff that's on the bottom of the phone to come out. But I think there are third-party battery cases that don't have chins. Am I wrong in thinking that? I feel like I've seen them.
I was able to find one when I looked for battery cases a few months ago, and there was one. Let me look it up. It's I forgot the name, but I found it yesterday.
But anyway, like I feel like Apple not having a chin is something Apple could do. But the real kicker to me was all that story I just gave you about the backpack being true to itself and having the extra capacity or whatever. When I found out that Apple's battery case actually has less battery capacity than the ones that try to hide the fact that there's a battery, that really killed it. Because it's like, if you're going to have a big backpack and be true to itself and say, here I am, I'm a battery, at least make that battery really high capacity, right? At least say, yeah, it's a little bit chunkier looking than other batteries, but boy, it's got a lot of capacity. But it doesn't. It has less capacity than those other ones. It looks like it should have more because it calls attention to itself. It is prominent, and yet the actual battery in there is smaller. And so then I feel like, the battery case that I would have liked, not that I'm in the market for battery case, but the one that I would have liked is either one that was just had massive capacity and was really high quality, or the one that had no chin and made the battery so thin that you don't even know that it's there. They gave you only a little bit more, maybe more than Marco's 25, maybe 30%, maybe 40% battery, and that Apple can make a super thin one that's like, you don't even know it's a battery case. It just looks like a little bit case, but it gives your phone a boost, right? Both of those products, I think, would be nicer products as far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't think the existence of a battery case means that either Apple is admitting the success has bad battery life, and I actually don't think the success has bad battery life. It really depends on for you individually. If it doesn't have enough battery life for the way you use the phone, then yes, you need to have a battery pack. But I think that the battery life and the success is reasonable. But as we've discussed many, many times, I also think there is a place in Apple's product line for a phone that is bigger and gets more battery life. That is not the 6S Plus. Because that's forcing you to say, hey, if you want more battery life, Apple makes a phone for you. Also, it's the size of a freaking tablet. And I feel like there's a place in their line for to say, and I feel like the 6S is that place, actually. Like if they come out with a 4-inch phone, that one should be super thin and small. And then the 6S should be a little bit thicker to have more battery. And then the 6 Plus should be the way it is. Or maybe add something in between there. Like, I think there's a place somewhere in their lineup for a thick phone that is not gargantuan. But they don't want to make the phone. They want to keep making these skinny things. And if you need more capacity from it, you put this case on it. And I see tons of people with battery cases in real life on all sizes of iPhones, the 5S size, the 4S, the 6, the 6S, lots and lots of battery cases, because those people know, like, I'm going to use my phone all day and I can't use it without the battery case. The battery case essentially becomes part of the phone. I also don't fault Apple for making a case. I don't think they're spreading themselves too thin. Marco was like, oh, they just want to get $100 more out of people. Of course they do. Why would they not? Like, are they somehow morally obligated not to make an accessory? Which they should make it's weird to have a manufacturer not make accessories. It's like Honda not making bras for your car. It's not like they want you to put a bra in your car, but they're sure as hell going to make you one because you want a bra. Like, Honda's like, we'll sell you one. Here you go. Like, maybe that's a bad example for car bras, but I'm just going back to neutral days. But yeah, no, Apple should totally sell every accessory. Why allow only third parties to make an accessory that a huge number of people buy? What was the stat I saw? Something like Apple, according to Apple's own statistics or something, like
70-something%.
Yeah, 78% of people put a case on their iPhones. Of course Apple should sell cases. And if some of those people want battery, of course they should make them. In fact, Apple should make 3 battery cases. Like, I have no objection to them doing that. I think they absolutely should, if only like to raise the game of the third-party manufacturers. So while this is a little bit of a disappointing product, there are some explanations for it that we'll get to in a second. But I think they should totally make a battery case. I can come up with a plausible explanation for the aesthetics of this case, but if you think it's ugly, you think it's ugly. Like, it's your opinion is your opinion, right? I mean, we all see people with cases that we think are ugly, but somebody loves them. And if anything, I wish Apple would just make more battery cases. So I think this is a good first run at a battery case. And at the very least, it's got us talking about it and it's interesting. It is not boring. Let's give it that.
Yeah, by the way, the case I was thinking of, and I couldn't remember it before, was the Sola Memo. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. There's a couple of them. There's a new version and the old version on Amazon for like $50 each. And the old version, this is the only battery case I've ever seen that has no chin. And it basically has an internal lightning port that plugs in, kind of up the bottom of the phone and like moves the real connector down slightly. And it uses its additional thickness of being a battery case to give you a lightning port that's just like down lower than like just below the real one.
Does it really give you a lightning port? Because I thought that was one of the claims of this. Like, wasn't this it was in the Mashable Arb, I think, the first battery case to have a fully featured lightning connector. That's was a claim I read somewhere about the Apple Lightning case.
Well, yeah, but the keywords there are fully featured, because you're both right. This does take a lightning connector, but it doesn't put the battery status and notification center and stuff like that only the first party case can do.
Well, is that a fully featured lightning connector? That's a feature that, granted, Apple can only do because they're the only ones who can change the OS. But is the lightning connector fully featured on that one? Anyway, like,
the first version of this one had a big problem, that, according to the reviews, of blocking cell signals because it had a metal frame, and everyone said that it blocked your signal. And this updated version now says it's updated now, new design that absolutely will not interfere with your signal. So I just ordered one. I'm going to try it. I'll report back and see like if that actually is true, because it's extremely thin relative to most battery cases, and it has no chin. So the bulk of it is significantly reduced. And if this is actually good and works and doesn't block the cell signal meaningfully, then I would say it's kind of embarrassing for Apple. But I'm guessing there's going to be some problem with this. There has to be some reason why no one else makes cases like this.
Is there any other color besides white? I'm not trying to be funny. I'm really asking.
There's a black one.
No, but the black one's the old version.
Oh, I thought you meant the Apple one. Yeah. No, the Apple one only comes in black and white, which is kind of boring too.
Yeah, that's also true. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they actually sell. I mean, I'm sure they're going to sell. Also, one thing to consider that is even more cynical than they just made it to get accessory money.
But why is that? Like, you always say that like like they just made it. Like, oh, do they? That's what they make products for. Like, I mean, they want to make great products, blah blah blah. But they just made it to make money. Like, how can you say that is a bad thing about like?
No, I guess that's true.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's. There's one. I'm trying to think of. Is there a situation where you could say this was just a money? I guess you could say it's a money grab if they put out a product that they put like minimal effort into just to get the money based on their name. And I don't think that's this, because you may think it's ugly and may disagree with the compromises they made, but it looks like it's up to the standards of all Apple first party cases in terms of fit and finish and the thoughtfulness of the features. Again, whether you disagree with them or not, like, it doesn't look like a piece of junk. So I think that's how you could call it a money grab. If they put out something that was just looked like a piece of junk, that it didn't feel good, it didn't look good, it didn't fit right. Maybe the only thing I can think of there is like the iPad 1 case. You could say that about, like, they just put this out to make money because that looked like a piece of crap and it looked like it was slapped together. Because we might as well say they just made a small laptop as a money grab for people who want a smaller laptop. Well, yeah, it's for people who want a smaller laptop,
No, that's all fair. But, okay, so carry this on to its logical conclusion then, and then we have a problem. Because they now have an incentive to not improve the iPhone battery life, to keep it to being almost sufficient for enough people, but just painful enough that a large portion of their customers will want to buy this additional $100 part. It's just like the 16 gig problem.
Yeah, I don't know if a large portion of people are going to buy.
No, I'm saying but now they have the incentive to keep the status quo.
Incentive to do what? They're already doing that. Like, I think the 6 Plus has given them a little bit of cover on this to say, you always said you wanted a phone with more battery capacity. Well, we made one. And you're like, yeah, but it's so big. Oh, you want everything now. It has to be exactly the size you want with exactly the battery capacity. Our testing shows that blah, blah, blah. I mean, as someone who uses a 6 all day and the battery, I don't use it all day, but anyway, I use it every day and the battery is totally fine for me. But I also know people who can't get through half a day with their 6, and we all have the same phone. It just depends on your usage pattern. So there's such a variability in usage pattern. It's very difficult to say whether they've over or undersized anything. If this battery case gives them cover, I don't think so, because battery cases existed already. So whatever cover that you think they're getting by having a battery case, they already had that cover, because there's this huge market for battery cases that I see everywhere for the people who torture their phones, who need to have a really long, so I don't think they needed to make this case to get that cover.
No, I think that's fair, but I think this dramatically increases that cover for them, because now they can point to this and they can say, well, you know what? If you don't like the battery life of your 6 or your whatever the new mainline iPhone is, if you don't like the battery life of that, it isn't our problem to fix. We offer you these battery cases for an extra $99. Like,
it was better when they could say, if we don't like the battery life, it isn't our problem. Buy one of these less than $99 battery cases that offer more capacity. If anything, this weakens their story, because now they're going to always be pitching theirs first, which has lower capacity and a higher price.
The problem here is that this, at least by having a first party option that they believe is good, this gives them permission internally when making these design decisions to no longer really think about giving more battery life to people built into the phone.
I think they'll still think about it exactly the same amount. I mean, like, as I've said from many years back to the old Hypercritical episode about naked robotic core, this seems to be the strategy they've been pursuing for a long time. A lot of people tweeted and say, "Oh, this is the naked robotic core theory. It's finally come." Not, it's finally come. It's been here the whole time. Like, it's not a new thing. Like, the thing that they've been doing is make it as thin and light as possible as you can to be useful to somebody, to a lot of people, and then allow people to add to it. And as Marco has pointed out many times, then you got to have 7 extra layers of basically essentially filler between there, because you got to have walls between your batteries, and the batteries have to be inside cases, and there's going to be a case on the outside, and it's inefficient. So they're going to keep dancing around in that line. I really think that none of us would be discussing this if they made a thicker iPhone 6. Like, maybe even also keep the thin one, make a thicker one for all day use or on the go things. It's all about diversifying the product line. And they really have diversified it a lot. They just can keep going. Maybe they consider this a diversification, but I think this is more of an accessorizing occasion, whatever. Anyway, they're adding accessories, which is one way to go to make your line more diverse, but it is no substitute for actually making your line more diverse.
And it isn't that ridiculous to think of them making another iPhone model that still is the same size as their like mid-range one that just has a bigger battery, because this is their most important product. They make more of them than anything else, and they have all sorts of such customizations in their other product lines. So like it wouldn't be that ridiculous of a concept.
Yeah, if the 4-inch phone comes back, then you'll see it's ripe for that. Because if a 4-inch phone comes back, it's like, see, Apple is not afraid to make sure, because with the iPhone being such an important product, there's one thing where they want to have economies of scale, but the other thing is you want to make sure you get as much of the market as possible. It's the whole reason they made bigger phones. It was like, well, a lot of people do want bigger phones, so let's make a bigger phone. In fact, let's not just make a bigger phone. Let's make 2 bigger phones, because if we make it one size, it's not going to be big enough for the people who want the huge one. But if we make just the huge one, people are going to flip out because they want the not so huge one. And again, like I said, if they make the 4-inch, it will show that like we understand that people want all different sizes. And then maybe someday, like either they have to make a thicker phone someday, or someday eventually the innards will take up so little power that this will be a moot point and we'll just cross the 24-hour barrier, and then we won't have to worry about it again until people start wanting their phone to last a week instead of a day.
We are also sponsored this week by Casper. Go to casper.com/ATP. Casper is an online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the price. Now, the mattress industry has always forced customers into paying notoriously high markups. Casper has revolutionized the industry by cutting the cost of dealing with resellers and showrooms and passing that savings along to you. Now, mattresses can cost well over $1,500, but Casper mattresses start at just $500 for a twin, $750 for full, $850 for queen, and $950 for king. Now, if you look at any high-quality king mattress, $950 for a king is an incredibly good price. I would say that's about half of what you'd be likely to pay for anything of similar quality. Now, Casper understands that buying a mattress online sounds kind of risky, so here's how this works. First of all, they give you a really great mattress. It is a hybrid of latex foam and memory foam to give you better nights and brighter days with just the right sink and just the right bounce. This is an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. Now, if you don't like it, no big deal. This is a risk-free trial and return policy, so you get to get your Casper in your house and sleep on it for up to 100 nights risk-free. This is way better than trying something in a showroom for 5 minutes. You get to actually sleep on it in your home for over 3 months. And if you don't like it, they will arrange for a free, painless return for you. Delivery is also free. It comes in a really small box that you can get it upstairs and stuff before it expands. It's a very practical online experience, and it's risk-free. And Casper mattresses are all made in America. So we have a special offer for you. If you use our code, if you go to casper.com/ATP, use code ATP, you get $50 off any mattress purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Check this out today. Casper.com/ATP, use code ATP for $50 off any mattress. Thanks a lot to Casper for sponsoring our show.
I was going to say, we actually have some useful information here. Apple, in another strange turn of events, is actually talking to the press about of all things, about the little lump on the back of their thing, which, like, when did this come out? Like, earlier in the week, I guess?
Yesterday, I think.
Yeah, and then Apple already is talking to the tech press and saying, we would like to talk to you about the mean things people are saying about our battery case. They had, I'm not going to say some excuses, let's say some explanations about what is the deal with the case. Why the hell is it like that? Why doesn't, one question is, that lump on the back. Fine, you want to have a lump on the back, you don't want it to be smoothed over, that's an aesthetic decision. Why doesn't the lump on the back go all the way from the top to the bottom of the phone? Why does it look like a Band-Aid where it's like there's the lumpy part in the middle and then the flat part? And Marco already talked about this, their explanation is it's about cellular reception. That if you put the battery over the top and the bottom of the, over the whole thing, the antenna lines on the 6S are in the top and the bottom. You don't want to block the antenna with a battery because it's not radio transparent. And so they're keeping the battery away from the radio parts, and that gives better reception, which I can kind of understand. That's something you have to deal with. If you really do coat the entire back of the phone with a battery, it's going to hurt reception. People who have battery cases that do hurt their reception know that it happens, and it can be annoying. So they avoided it just by not putting the battery there. Did you have to stay so far away from the things? Could you made it again? Like I say, if you're going to put the big lump, why not make the lump thicker? Like why not go out and have more capacity? It really is depressing to me.
Taper it, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess at a certain point it comes down to an aesthetic decision. Like, you could have left the battery the same exact size and filled in the part with, like, essentially a radio transparent taper. It's not battery that's covering the things, it's just taper. But I think the taper comes down to aesthetics. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is a legit complaint, but this is Apple's story. that a lot of the battery cases, like the Mophis and stuff, are two-piece things that are hard to get the phone in and out of, and that the Apple one, because the battery doesn't extend all the way up to the top is like bendy, and you could just bend the top back and then slide the phone out. I think Apple has a video of this. And they're very excited and proud about the fact that it's easy to get the phone in and out. I don't know how many people are taking their phones in and out of battery cases a lot. Maybe it's because they're so hard to get in and out of, like those really tight-fitting battery cases. But is that, I guess it's okay to say, hey, we made it really easy to get the phone in and out, but I just don't see someone coming home every day and taking their phone out or putting it in. It doesn't seem like a frequent activity to me. But that's true of any case, not just battery case. Like, I never take my cases off my phone. And you shouldn't, because you'll find all the weird dust and stuff that collects up there, and it's gross.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I typically use the Apple leather case for my iPhone because, like Marco was saying earlier, I happen to like the feel of it. It is a little bit exorbitantly expensive, but
well, not anymore. When we bought our 6th generation ones, it was like $60. Now they're $45.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. They dropped it with the S generation.
Oh, I didn't know that. So that's not quite so bad. But anyway, the only time I use a battery case, though, which I do have, I have a Lenmar one, which I really liked until Marco showed me this one that we were talking about a minute ago, which I kind of am lusting over now. But anyway.
Well, let me get it first, and I'll tell you if it sucks.
Yeah, exactly. But I have this Lenmar battery case, which is just a cheaper knockoff of the Mophis, and it works really well, and I really like it. But the only time I ever use it is either a conference or when I'm at a football game, when I'm not going to be around, wall power for hours and hours and hours and hours. Other than that, I never ever use this case. And so getting my phone out of the Apple leather case and into the Lenmar case is useful to have that easier, but I by and large agree with you that it's not the sort of thing that I'm doing daily. I'm doing it like once a week during the fall, and then maybe daily during WWDC. But that's it.
That's frequent enough that I would say easy in and out would be good. Although I do have to wonder, especially with these things, like the more times you take the thing in and out, the more loose it kind of possibly get, and the more you could trap things between it. That's another thing they talk about this on the Apple website. I like that they have the microfiber on the inside, and that it's cleaning your phone when you put it in there. It's like, it's no getting around the fact that if you happen to get like 3 pieces of sand in there and you shove your phone inside it, microfiber or not, you're going to make scratches. The other things about the lump, I mean, Apple has talked about like gripability and stuff and how it's supposed to be better for that. And Gruber said he actually, rather than putting his pinky on the bottom like you guys do, with the lump, you can put your pinky under the lump instead of under the very bottom of the phone, which probably helps because the chin is making the very bottom of the phone go even lower down. So resting your pinky underneath the lump could be a comfortable way to do it. Like, having never held one of these, I can't really think about how it would feel. Would it feel awkward, or would it feel better, like giving you an extra place to grip, like a handhold, that lump on the back? But the Apple silicone case is nice. My wife has one on her iPhone, and the lump thing, I don't know. Like, what I keep coming back to is many of our discussions about past Apple products have been that they favor form over function. We talked about the MacBook One and the single port and how everything has to be so skinny, and how the phones are skinny, and how everything has to be so, like just made like a sculpture. The Apple mouse, the tiny keyboards, the half-size arrow keys, form over function, too much, But they can't make it ugly for one little bit of extra functionality. They just say, no, can we just make it beautiful and do the best we can within those constraints? And one thing you can say about this case is that it absolutely does not put form in front of function, right?
Nope.
Right, so because not necessarily because it's ugly, but because, like, look, it has a job to do, and it doesn't really spend a lot of time figuring out how to make it look like a beautiful piece of sculpture, right? And again, getting back to it being true to itself. I think that old iMac design, I love that iMac design so much. Like, I felt like that iMac design had both, in that they said, let the function dictate the form. We can't figure out a way to get these internals on the back of the screen and have it look decent. So don't even try. Have the screen and have the screen be free by itself, and you can move it anywhere. You can twist it around, you can move it up, you can move it down. It stays where you put it. It was awesome, right? And the base, it also looks beautiful, but it is also totally stable, stays right there. It's small. The base of that iMac was actually a lower amount of volume, I believe, than the Mac Power Mac G4 Cube. So it was actually smaller than you thought it was. Like, that is what you want, is a beautiful blending of it. But this one, when it came time to choose, should we like smooth this thing over and try to hide all this stuff and make it look like a beautiful piece of sculpture, perhaps sacrificing something of utility, like maybe not having a good lightning pass through, or maybe having ridiculously low battery capacity to make it completely invisible and not useful to people except for Marco, who wanted more than an extra 20%. They didn't, and they made a different choice. And when they make a different choice, what their reward is a million articles saying, you have too much function and you should have paid more attention to form because I think what you made is ugly. And I guess that's because people think the ugliness is a result of them not paying enough attention to looks, right? If they just made something that was ugly, like say they made the MacBook One that had one port and everyone was pissed about one port, and it was ugly on top of that, you couldn't say, well, you said you wanted form or, function over form, so you would say, no, they screwed up both. It is both not useful because it has one stupid port, and it's ugly as sin. Instead, they made this beautiful thing that has one port, and then you could simply say, well, they wanted to make it beautiful and thin, and then making a statement with this one port and the scalped batteries and all this other stuff. Like they spent so much, all this technology and effort to make this beautiful thing. And we agree that it's beautiful. So we say, yes, you did that, but you did the wrong balance. In this one, we don't agree that it's beautiful. We feel like you have not made it beautiful. So we're going to say that you didn't go for form. Instead, you must have gone for function. And you look at it functionally, you're like, well, it's easy to take in and out. It has a battery in it, has lightning pass through. The only thing you could maybe ding them on is if you really wanted to go with the form of a function, you would have made the chin even bigger so you could fit the long headphone jacks in it. But this does feel to me like a different balance than usual of form over function from Apple, if only because we all disagree about the form being beautiful. And I want to encourage that, because half the time all we're saying is don't make your things beautiful sculptures, because then you end up in absurd situations like the harpoon turtle mouse. Think more about form, and they think more about form, and then we all yell at them. So I feel Apple. I can empathize with Apple. Feel like we can't win with these guys.
Well, I mean, the right answer here is to recognize that if it is truly not possible to make a really good external battery case for an iPhone that also looks good, and good looks are important to Apple, then the answer is to reduce or remove the need for external battery cases.
Yeah, like reducing it, that's where it comes down to, like, how much, if you added 10% capacity, how much do you reduce the need? 20% capacity, like, when do you get to the point where you're actually reducing the need? Because I think the people who need, like, those big Mophis, Apple should never make a phone as big as those big Mophis, or like even like 80% as big. Like, say, take one of the big Mophis, cut out all the intermediary plastic, and merge those milliamp hours into the phone. That's too big for Apple to make, right? But people have those needs, and so there's always going to be need for some battery packs. And I just don't know what the ratio is of all the people who need battery packs, how many people could get away with just adding 20%, 30%, right? So that's kind of what the third-party battery manufacturers are doing. And if Apple is not privy to that information because their surveys or focus groups don't work, that is a motivation for Apple to make 7 different sizes of battery packs. And then, hey, Apple, you'll have your own information about exactly how much more capacity people need. And you could use that to decide how thick to make the next phone, or, what target battery life or whatever.
But now with the severe disincentive to ever do so, because that'll reduce the iPhone ASP.
I think by making one case, if they can make this, will give them some information, some real firsthand information about what people want out of battery cases. And if they make more battery cases, that will give them even more information. Like, they're always making that calculus. How big do we make the battery in this phone? Should we be going for a target battery life like the iPad, where we just go for 10 hours all the time? We think we're okay with that? I don't know. What do you think their target is for the iPhones? They seem to vary more. Someone did a chart recently. They seemed like it was kind of consistent, but a little bit lumpy. The iPads were more of a straight line, and the iPhone history was a little bit lumpy up and down here and there. But maybe they're just holding their breath and saying, if we just wait a little bit longer and we get Intel to manufacture the A11 for us at whatever insane feature size that they're up to at that point, and we make everything so low power, eventually this will just be a moot point. We just need to get across that finish line. It's already a moot point on iPads. They're already on iPads, like saying, well, just fill that space with empty space with the speakers. Like, 10 hours is fine. And we pretty much all agree, like, for the most part, 10 hours so far is fine for the iPads. For the phones, they're always on the ragged edge of, we don't want to make it really big and thick, but we also want it to last kind of all day. And we know we can't really make it last all day because that would just be way too big. So, I don't know, like, every year I think they're going to get closer, and every year they just put a more powerful CPU and GPU in there, or make the screen bigger so that sucks even more power. And it just seems like we're not really making progress on battery life. But I have to think somewhere out there in the not distant future, we're going to start crossing over, like, give me like 1 or 2 or 3 more hours, and then all this stuff starts to fade into the background and just be applicable to people who need to be able to, like, play games on iOS for 9 hours in a row and not lose their battery, or whatever the hell people are doing to use those giant Mophis all day.
Yeah. A couple of quick notes about the positives to the battery case. One of the things that appeals to me about this is that it does have that lightning pass-through. It sounds like there are other cases on the market that have this, like the one Marco just impulse bought a few minutes ago. But having this Lenmar case that I do like, but also having to carry one micro USB port just for that, and I pretty much have no other devices that use it, is kind of annoying. So I like that it has lightning pass-through. And then it also has some phantom passive antenna help, which, I mean, if you guys have something to say about that, we can. But finally, the other thing that I think is appealing is when you drop down in Notification Center to see what your battery life is on your phone and possibly your watch, this will appear in Notification Center as well, which I think is really nice, rather than having some stupid blinking lights on the back of the thing. Apparently, there is a blinking light on the inside of the thing for when you're charging, but that's obviously not terribly useful if the phone is in the case. I think those are all positive. I think that's good. And actually, I'd never thought about putting your pinky there. I've not held one of these yet, but that actually sounds really appealing too, because maybe that can shimmy my pinky up a bit so I can actually reach the top of my already too big phone.
That's another policy decision. Speaking of like OS integration, what are the policies? I don't have battery cases, so I don't know what battery cases do this, but what is the policy in terms of if you plug either a terrible micro USB or a lightning cable or something to the bottom of your phone that's inside a battery case? Does it charge the battery case first? Does it charge the phone first? When you put a phone into a battery case, does the battery case immediately begin charging the phone up to 100% and then stop charging when it goes that? Or does the battery case charge the phone up to some percentages like 75 or 80 and just try to keep it there as you use the phone? Like, how does the software in the battery case, I guess, decide what to do with power? And there is an argument to be made for the battery case not charging the phone up to 100% and keeping it that way, because keeping lithium-ion batteries at 100% charge all the time shortens their life versus keeping them at, like, I think optimal is like 40% or some crap like that. But at any rate, keeping it charged at max all the time is not great for battery life. Even OS 10 at this point, like, does that thing where it like lets your battery drain down to like 99, 98, 97% and then cranks you back up. Like, it's not good to keep it 100% all the time. And I've heard that some battery cases try to keep your phone around 75 or something to extend the battery life on it or whatever. But those type of decisions are things that can be adjusted, I guess, in software or maybe in firmware. Does the battery case have firmware? I don't know. Some cooperation between the device with the software on it and the battery case would be good here. And it's a perfect opportunity to try to do something that you couldn't do as a regular person, because as a regular person without a battery case, you have to charge 100% before you leave the house. You're not going to charge your phone to 70% to preserve the battery life, because you're just going to maybe run out before the end of the day. So you're always charging to 100%. People with battery cases can maybe they're frying their battery case, keeping it charged to 100%, but I'd be more comfortable doing that than the thing that's inside the phone, because it's probably still cheaper to get a new battery case than it is to replace a battery inside the phone. And certainly you don't have to worry about opening up your phone and doing all that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, also, if there is integration between the battery case and the phone, which in Apple's case there's software integration at the phone level, and no one else will be able to get that. There's one more thing you can do that's smart that is unfortunate that other cases can't do. iOS has a number of changes that it does, behaviors that it does, heuristics that it does when it thinks it's plugged into AC power. It will more readily download things in the background. It'll pull apps more often. It'll use more power when it thinks it's plugged into AC power. If Apple makes a case that integrates in the software, I think a smart thing to do would be for the battery case to communicate to the phone, hey, I'm also a battery. This is not really AC power, even though I'm charging you. And for the phone to continue operating as if it was running on battery power. I don't know if Apple's case does that. I do know that third-party cases can't and don't do that.
Yeah, it might also be neat to see like what the policy decision is about low power mode. I guess maybe you'd never get into low power mode if the battery case is always charging the phone, and if you did reach it, it would be legit to turn it on. But what if you had a battery case that was like withholding its charge from the phone until the phone dipped to a certain level, and then it triggered the low power warning? I don't know. This is yet another reason why actually increasing the capacity of the battery inside the phone removes all these complexities. You don't have to make all these weird policy decisions about how you share the battery and all that other stuff. But bottom line is, official support for everything we just discussed is a good idea, because no matter how big you make the battery in the phone, someone's always going to need something that's the size of a bar of Ivory soap, and there's going to be battery cases exist. And if battery cases are going to exist, the OS should really have support for them. Like, there should be a made for iPhone program to be compliant battery case to get all the features we just described, even if Apple's the first one to do them. Like, why withhold that? I was surprised to learn that I read the same thing, that as far as iPhones are concerned, they think they're attached to AC power when attached to a battery case. These battery cases have been around for a really long time, and you would think by now Apple would have official support for, hey, if you're making a battery case, do this and that and have these resistances on these pins, and will let us know that you are a battery case and we'll treat you the right way.
We are also sponsored tonight by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com and start building your website today. We are a bunch of programmers who listen to the show for the most part. If you aren't a programmer and you're listening to the show, you probably at least know programmers. Many of us know how to make websites in other ways. Most of us shouldn't be making websites in other ways. Now, I'll tell you a secret. I really don't like making websites. I am a programmer. I'm a web programmer. I hate making websites because it just seems like my time is better spent solving different problems, not solving the same problems that people like Squarespace have already solved in ways that are better than anything I can do. And Squarespace sites take so little effort. Do yourself a favor. Next time you need to make a site for something, whether it's a podcast, a blog, maybe you're making a site for somebody else. They're asking you to make a site. Try it on Squarespace first. Give it an hour or two. You can probably get done 90 to 100% of what you need for that site on Squarespace in less than 2 hours, and then you're done. You don't have to build it. You don't have to support it. That's a big one. Squarespace takes care of all of that for you. Squarespace sites are beautifully designed. They have these amazing templates created by professional designers. They're fully responsive. They have all sorts of built-in features if you need them, from galleries and blogs to cover pages, built-in images, all sorts of amazing stuff you can do, and including built-in commerce. An entire built-in store functionality is all on this platform. This is all hosted on rock-solid infrastructure. Your sites look professionally designed regardless of your skill level. No coding is required, although if you want, you can inject custom code. These are all intuitive, easy to use, what you see is what you get tools. Get a free domain if you sign up for a year up front. Start your free trial site today. Really, next time you have a project, start it on Squarespace. See how far you get in 2 hours. You'll be shocked how good it is. Start your free trial today. No credit card required for that free trial at squarespace.com. When you do decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace, build it beautiful.
One more bit on the smart battery case. There was a story in The Verge about does Apple's smart battery case look weird because Mophie has a ton of patents on battery cases? Well, Mophie does have a ton of patents on battery cases, some of them involving a two-part case, which it snaps over the thing, and just, tons of dumb patents. Is that why Apple's case looks like this? Apple says no. In their strange communication with the tech press that they are doing nowadays, they apparently have said through channels unequivocally no.
That's not entirely surprising, since this Lenmar case that I have operates the exact same way that the supposed Mophie patents would prohibit. But to be fair, Lenmar is a much smaller target than Apple would be, so I'm not sure anyone cares.
I think Apple, the reason I would believe this story that Apple says that they didn't make the case they did because of patents is not because I think Apple. Apple could have made the case and not infringed on Apple's. I think if Apple made a case that infringed on Mophie's patents, Apple wouldn't care because they've got $1 bazillion and Mophie doesn't. If it seemed like Apple was about to lose the case, they would just buy Mophie. Seriously. Giant companies like Apple are not afraid of small companies like Mophie when it comes to infringing patents because they could just tie them up in litigation until the company goes out of business. Not that they're willfully infringing patents, but as I've said many times, everything is patented. There's tons of dumb patents. There's nothing you can do in the technology sector that is not violating someone's patents. Mm-hmm. So every single thing Apple does is violating somebody's patents, and that's true of every technology company. It's just the stupid cost of doing business. And so Apple is not going to have some sort of meeting before deciding their iPhone battery case and say, let's take a survey of all the patents that are held by people who have patents on iPhone battery cases and make sure whatever we do doesn't come close to one of those. They're just going to make the case that they want to make. If they didn't, they would be paralyzed. We're adding a feature to iOS. Please spend 6 months trying to search for every super dumb patent that applies to what we're planning. They're just going to do it. They're just going to do it, and they're going to wait for somebody to sue them because that's the way business works in the stupid world that we have here in the United States.
All right. Anything else on the case?
I can't believe we talked for so long about a battery case.
Have you met us? Of course we did.
Did anyone order this? I mean,
no.
You'll have 6. Well, actually, I only have a 6. So they didn't. I assume it fits a 6, right?
It does. Yes, it does. It doesn't fit the pluses, but it does fit the regulars. No, I mean, I can see why people would choose this one. It does have some integration. It does feel probably pretty good if you want a rubberized silicone case feel for grip purposes. It is probably good for that, although I don't know whether the bulge in the back would be more comfortable, less comfortable. I don't know. But I see why people would choose this one. But I think anybody who... this sounds so stupid. Anybody who really cares about their battery case, I think would find many better options.
It depends on what you care about. Like this may look rugged to some people. I'm not sure how the aesthetics will be received by people who are not as obsessed with like the Apple aesthetic as we are, and perhaps the people listening to this podcast are. Because Apple's design is a particular aesthetic, and it appeals to us, obviously, because we like Apple products and we buy them and stuff, but it's not necessarily appealing to everybody. It's kind of like, the Aston Martin aesthetic versus the Corvette versus Ferrari, like just historically speaking. Those are three very different styles, and some people really like Aston Martin and think Corvettes are ugly, and some people really like Corvettes and Mustangs and think Aston Martins don't appeal to them, and, the same thing with Ferrari. Like, not every style appeals to every person. And when I look at the style, I try to say, is this a style that would appeal to somebody? And I think what I think of is like power tools, or maybe a combination of like LL Bean and like DeWalt power tools or something. Like, there is a sort of rugged, rubbery, grommety kind of aesthetic here that might actually be appealing to some people, and maybe there's more of them than there are of the people who want everything. I would say Apple's in car manufacturer analogy is closest to like Aston Martin, but people do like Corvettes and Mustangs, and they have bulges and flares and nostrils and all sorts of weird, rude things. So I'm not entirely sure if this is actually, even though it is so different than the aesthetic that we like from Apple, is it really unappealing to everybody? I mean, at the very least, your phone will sit flat on the table.
Oh, God. First of all, I think if DeWalt designed a battery case, they might have, I don't even know, but if they did, it would be way better looking than this. Secondly, I would far rather have a Corvette than this, and even though I don't like the way Corvettes look usually.
Have you seen the back of the current one? I don't know.
It's pretty rough. But have you seen this? I mean, have you seen the battery case?
I have to say, it's growing on me. It's growing on me. This one, I look at the back of this now, I start thinking it looks like the interior of a space station set from a 1970s movie.
Wow.
Like, take a bunch of these. If you could do these in miniature, like, take a bunch of these, erase the Apple logo, and line them up to make like a hallway. Like, these are the walls of the hallway.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I can see that.
That is from a sci-fi movie. They're like little bulging around. But what I've heard from, I think this was in the Mashable article, like, don't get the white one, people. Like, I know, we've already talked to Casey about this, but like, white looks good in some things, but for something you're going to hold, it's going to get dirty and gross really fast. Like, there's no avoiding it. We handle our phones all the time. We put them in pockets. We put them in purses. We put them down on tables. Do not get the white one unless you're okay with the fact that it's going to not look like Apple's product shots for more than like a week.
Yeah, was it Christina's who said like it was discoloring after like one day?
Yeah, I mean, how can it not? Like, it is magical, bright white, Johnny Ives' white world white. Nothing will stay. If you touch it, nothing will stay that color. Sorry. Like, even like porcelain, like even if it was made of fine china, I feel like it would eventually get ugly. But this is silicone. It will not stay that color.
Yeah.
What else do we have to talk about? We had a lot of updates. All the things got updated. Do we care?
Well, we could enumerate them and see if we have anything to see about them. We got iOS 9.2. Is there anything noteworthy there? I updated my devices and did not notice anything and didn't recall seeing anything significant in the change notes.
Was it you that was very upset about the done button in Safari View controller?
Not upset. Like, they keep moving stuff around. Like, I don't know if it's better or worse than the other place. It still hasn't fixed the actual thing that drives me nuts about Safari View controllers is as soon as you scroll, it scrunches up and hides, and then you have to do something else to make it appear again before you can dismiss it. That is the maddening thing. I don't really care where the button is, because the argument can be made either side. It's like, depends on what hand you're holding the thing with or whatever. Like, there is no right position for the done button. And maybe, like, I was thinking, why did they move it? Maybe they were like, well, that's like where the back button is, like on the left side. And even though this isn't a right to left navigation, the thing that makes it go away should be on the left and not the right. I don't know what their thinking was, but the bottom line is that it still disappears as soon as you start scrolling a web page. And that is the real criminal act of iOS 8 and 9, and not the position of the done button. But yeah, that's the only thing I've noticed so far.
I mean, I've heard from a couple Apple people here and there that these were all pretty substantial bug fix updates, and that's good to hear. Like, I kind of like when there's a significant update that appears to contain nothing new, basically, because that usually means a lot of bug fixes.
I would have liked to see that in the change notes, though. Like, that's what I was looking for. Like, yeah, show me all the bugs, but they didn't show anything. So
no, it improves performance and stability. I mean, you know, 'cause they're not going to tell you, like, here's 500 bugs that we fixed in these releases, because they're not going to make themselves look bad.
They do say some things, like they, you know, fixed, like I forget what's changing us, but like, you know, fix the bug that could cause whatever in whatever application, something really obscure. It's like, if you're going to list that, are you not listing the other things that are equal in obscurity? I don't quite understand the political machine that determines what makes things be in release notes. Because I do see stuff that sometimes it's not just like performance enhancements, bug fixes. There's like some very specific things in there, which makes me think, is there nothing else of that same specificity that's in this release? Surely there is. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's very like PR massaged to be, you know, like very, first of all, very passive, like, you know, fixes an issue in which certain people were affected by a certain, you know, weird behavior. Like it's they used wording and phrasing to be just very passive, very like, this just kind of happened to us. You know, it wasn't like it's PR. It's all PR.
All right. Yeah, I would agree, John. I didn't notice anything. I've updated my iPad and my iPhone and Aaron's iPhone. Updated my watch. Haven't noticed anything there. So, yeah.
We got the OS 10, 10.11.2 update, which those release notes also, like, they were like, hey, we added some fix for some bug in mail or something. But I saw you, Marco, asking on Twitter and to the Void, did they fix, like, USB audio, the USB stack specifically related to audio? And did you get any answers about that?
Yeah, Tipster said that it, because like there are a lot of problems in El Cap so far regarding the USB stack and as it relates to audio devices, where a lot of times, and I've talked to a few other people, I know this happens to them too, it isn't just me, where a lot of times I will have my audio device that I'm like playing music through or whatever just stop working completely. Just like music just stops playing. If you hit play in iTunes, the time doesn't even advance. Like it's not even getting to the point of sending the buffer out. And then you try to like select different sound output devices and like it fails, or you can't select one, or it just disappears for a while. And oftentimes it's fixed by just waiting like 10 minutes. Oftentimes it's fixed by rebooting. Very, very strange. Apparently the USB stack had a lot of changes done on El Cap. And so I've heard from various people, including ATP Tipster, that that has been now fixed in the .2 release. So I'm excited to try it out. I haven't actually installed it yet, but I'm going to install it after the show.
Do you have these problems only on your computer, which is festooned with German audio equipment and USB things? Like, because I'm wondering if it's like because you are exercising both the USB subsystem and the audio component of that more than I am. But I've had zero USB problems, but I also do almost zero things involving USB. All I do is like a couple times a week I plug in my USB mic to this one Mac, and that's it. Everything else is not. I'm not unplugging and plugging things. I don't have any other USB audio gear except for this mic, and I've had no problem. So I'm wondering if it's because like you feel like you're actually using the USB stack in a much more thorough way than I am, that you're running into these problems. And I guess your control group would be like Tiff's computer if she's not messing with. Maybe she is. Maybe you got all those mics hooked up to her computer too. Like, can you tell if it's because you are actually doing USB and audio stuff that's causing this?
The problem is the bugs aren't easily reproducible. It just like kind of happens out of nowhere, you know, maybe once a week or every few days. So like there's never any one thing that seems to trigger it. So I have no idea, but hopefully it's fixed. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if it is fixed. Because other than that, El Cap has been very good for me. It has not had any other real problems to speak of. But that's been a pretty annoying one.
Yeah, I think I've seen more people, like every once in a while someone will come across my Twitter stream or something I'm blogging or I'm like, Apple should do a Snow Leopard release where they just fix things or whatever. And it's like, didn't they just do that? Like 10.11 is very, as we talked about, very Snow Leopardy, where they didn't spend a lot of time on big new features. They tried to do bug fixes. Discovery D kind of messed that up a little bit. But here we are at 10.11.2, not too long after 10.11. By the time the 0.2 release comes, to have dealt with the Discovery D, which granted, which was a hangover from Yosemite. See, that one's like, oh, they didn't fix that one very quickly. It took a long time for them to fix it. But anyway, by the time 10.11.2 comes down, if we're kind of saying that the major problems that were in 10.11.0 perhaps seem to have been addressed, that's a reasonable timeline for OS 10 releases. By the 0.2, 3, or 4, most of the stuff should be shaken out. And the 0.4 is like back in the day when it was 18 months or 2 years between releases. But if it turns out that 10.11.2 got the really big issues, aside from all the iCloud stuff, which really has more to do with the server and the architecture, and they can't actually fix by updating the OS, which is sad. But anyway, aside from that, if they really have shaken everything out, that I feel like that is fully on a Snow Leopard-y type schedule. People forget that Snow Leopard had some weird ass stuff in 10.6.0 as well, like every release does. So I've been very happy with El Cap so far. I upgraded everything on the day it was released. I immediately apply all of the point updates. I haven't regretted it. I have experienced no weirdness anywhere. Again, other than iCloud stuff, which I really like. Anything that involves servers, I don't blame the OS entirely for that.
And really, I mean, honestly, like for a while, the Mac kind of felt neglected because iOS was taking all the glory and all the time and all the new stuff. And then Apple started doing these like massive changes to the Mac, trying to make it more like iOS, like in the Lion era and forward from that. And it just started getting really weird and really bad. And then you had, like, I think Yosemite was kind of the peak of Apple not only having mediocre ideas on a lot of the Mac stuff, but also starting to have really bad execution of a lot of it, where it's just so buggy and so many problems.
That was Leopard and Lion both had bad implementations of everything too.
That's true. Fair enough. Okay.
Maybe it's just the odd releases.
Maybe. But I feel like now we're getting to the point where the neglect in favor of working on iOS is actually helping the Mac most of the time, because now it's like, you can leave us alone and stop touching things and let us do our work on this pretty stable platform, and you can go have your fun on iOS. And the only thing we have to watch out for is when they do one of these like kind of drive-by rewrites. Like Discovery D was one. This USB subsystem in El Cap seems to have been one. Certainly, like the disk utility in El Cap is one. Like they kind of do these drive-by rewrites where they, for some reason, they decide something needs to be dramatically rewritten or refactored or redesigned or whatever, and they do like an 80% job of it, and then they just move on to other things, and it leaves this subsystem broken for a while. As long as we can minimize those times where that happens, and they're leaving us mostly alone on the Mac, I'm okay with that. Because like this is where we get our work done, you know. Because those of us who aren't using iPad Pros, but this is where this is where we get our work done. Please don't mess it up. Please just leave us alone. Let it keep working. Please stop updating it every year, and please stop trying to do major, like massive shifts on it. Just please.
Well, like I said, they're not doing those major rewrites for their health. Like, they're doing them for a reason. And the only difference is they just have to actually execute well on them. Like, two examples. I gave LaunchD as an example in the past of, like, why the hell are you replacing a NID? It's perfectly fine. Like, every Unix uses it. Why do you think you have to have your own thing? It's like second system syndrome. You screw anything. But LaunchD is awesome. Right? And LaunchD was buggy at first too, but they did it. And they did it because the existing thing that filled that role didn't have the features they needed. LaunchD does. They executed it well enough that they didn't have to roll it back. I know that's a low bar, but they did it well enough so they didn't have to roll it back. Most people didn't even notice it, except for the fact that I wrote about it in one of my old OS 10 reviews. And we were like, oh, LaunchD, what's that? But I can tell you that the original version of LaunchD had tons of bugs, but they got it done well enough, and they moved forward. Another example is Icon Services, which has had bugs, I don't know for how many freaking years. Like, they're mostly cosmetic, and maybe that's why they didn't get fixed, but Icon Services would, like, corrupt its caches in some weird way, and all your dock icons would show up all crazy and pixelated for just years and years and years, and it's like, obviously this isn't a quick bug fix. Obviously there is something architecturally wrong with Icon Services, and someone needs to go in there with a big wire brush and say, all right, what the hell is going on, Icon Services? Let me deal with this. Let me fix it. And that took so many years to happen. And honestly, I wish they had tackled that sooner. Sometimes you have a subsystem that either because it's super old and crusty and it's not even yours, and maybe it's like BSD code left over from God knows when, or because the first guy who took a pass at it did a crappy job, and you know, you want to take a second run at it and do a better job. That's what you have to do. That's the job of basically the core OS group. I want them to continue doing that. I just want them to do a better job. And I think they do a good job almost all the time. And a lot of my old OS 10 reviews, I've applauded the CoreOS group as a great example of, see guys, CoreOS is rewriting major components and doing a good job and improving things and fixing their bugs and year over year making things better and adding features. Why doesn't everybody else, say on the GUI team or whatever, do that? And the answer is that they have other stakeholders, let's say, like people who care about aesthetics and marketing and branding, whereas people doing LaunchD have nobody worrying about aesthetics or branding or anything like that. But anyway, I'm totally in favor of them continuing to look at their OS, decide which subsystems are really due for either a really thorough spring cleaning or maybe a complete replacement with something new. You just have to do it well enough that you don't have to roll it back when Vint Cerf complains about it 6 months later. Whatever. I feel like that's a low bar.
But that isn't a given, though. I mean, I think modern Apple, with this incredibly relentless annual release schedule of everything, all these different product lines that keep expanding into even more product lines and having the engineering resources spread incredibly thin and constantly moving around between things, I feel like what we keep seeing from Apple is that they don't seem to be incredibly good anymore at doing these big rewrites of subsystems or big new initiatives. Their record is pretty bad.
What have they screwed up besides Discovery D?
Apple Music is a big one.
The USB one, I would say, is a success, especially if this point two. If you have a big refactoring and a big changes to a major subsystem, and you get all the kinks worked out of it by point two, that's probably pretty much all you can hope for. That's a pretty good job. I still have faith in those groups to be able to do this. And the yearly schedule, you can debate about that, but really, if they're competent, and I think they mostly are, all a yearly schedule does is push features that take more than one release out farther, because every release has a certain amount of overhead associated with it. And the more releases you have, it's say you want to do a feature, and it's I know this feature is too big to fit into one release. I'm not going to say file system, but you can think of something else. I know this feature is too big to fit into one release. How do I do this project at Apple? And Apple would say, you can do that project just fine. You just have to be on a multi-year plan. If your thing takes a year and a half, we're not going to cut a release in a year and a half for you. You're just going to be on the 2-year one. So, there's the overhead of each release that adds to just, it's just overhead. It just adds to the work that everybody has to do. And then your schedules just get pushed out. Really, yearly releases is simply a matter of, good management of software organization. What's above the line? What's below the line? What fits in this release? What doesn't? And if you do a good job about keeping things in and booting them out, I mean, you could even say Discovery D was the problem of that. Not as if they did a bad job in Discovery D, but during the meetings when they say what's in and what's out for 10.10, someone should have said, we really wanted to do Launch D in this, Discovery D in this one, but it's not up to snuff yet. It booted to 10.11, booted to 10.12. You just keep kicking it down the road. That is the exercise. You could have, until you get down to a certain point where the overhead dwarfs the amount of dev time you have, you could have 6-month releases if you wanted. It's all just a matter of how you draw the line for, in sort of project management parlance, what's in and what's out for this release, what's ready to go and what's not ready to go. So I think having an organization that is disciplined in that way, and I think I don't know if you attribute it to Craig Federighi or whoever, they went from the sort of loosey-goosey artistic, we'll release the OS when it's ready, Steve Jobs kind of let's figure it out type of thing, to a much more regimented, we're going to put ourselves on a yearly schedule, we're going to be disciplined about it. That is much more sort of, business 101. We should be able to do this. If we are an efficient, good organization, it shouldn't be I don't really know when the next OS is coming out. It's whenever it's done, and the iPhone is taking some time away, so Leopard's going to be a little bit later. It's no, we're doing a release every year, and if your stuff doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. But the train is leaving the station with or without you. I think doing that inside Apple was a really good decision. They're just working on what needs to fit in it and not fit in those releases.
All right, what else got updated?
WatchOS got updated. Big news.
And actually, that is sort of big news. Real-time follow-up for myself. I didn't notice any WatchOS updates, except I went to kick off the workflow I have to tell Aaron I'm on my way home. So this is using the workflow app, and it will figure out the driving time from where I am to the house, and then queue up a text message for Aaron saying I'll be home in 15 minutes or whatever. It used to be on the watch that I would kick off that workflow, and then I would have to do handoff to actually send the text message. But now I can run that workflow, and it is capable of sending the text message from the watch, which is super exciting. I know you're both really happy that has changed.
Why did the watch updates take so long? That's my question. It's such a small device. It has such little storage. What is it doing?
Honestly, I think it's because the watch is just really slow. I mean, CPU-wise, it seems to be roughly on the level of an iPhone 3GS. And if you look at like Geekbench iOS benchmarks, by Geekbench standards, the iPhone 3GS is about 16 times slower than an iPhone 6S. So if you think about like the kind of thing it's doing, it's running on a processor that's 16 times slower than what we're accustomed to. Now, granted, it's a simpler OS. I'm sure the patching process is simpler, etc. But keep that in mind as the baseline of like everything that it does that has to patch with that CPU is going through something 16 times slower than an iPhone 6S.
I wonder if the storage has got to be slower too. And I wonder what the bottleneck is. Is the bottleneck the CPU? Is the bottleneck storage? Hell, maybe the bottleneck's RAM for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and it could be the wireless connection of receiving the update. Who knows what? It's a lot of things, but I think primarily it's because the CPU is just so incredibly slow in it. But we'll see. Honestly, like, thinking about, like, there's been rumors of the second watch coming out, possibly even as soon as the spring, which shouldn't be that ridiculous since the last one came out last spring. And there's been rumors about what it might be. The biggest one is that it might have a FaceTime camera, which sounds terrible to me, honestly. It sounds like you wouldn't want to be on either end of that conversation. But what is a little bit disappointing is that I haven't heard anything about it being faster. All the rumors are about FaceTime cameras and Wi-Fi abilities. And I hope they can make it faster because I've had a lot of trouble figuring out like how to really use the watch beyond the watch face. Anything involving apps or even glances on the watch, I have gotten very little into, and part of it is because it's just so incredibly slow to do pretty much anything. So if the watch gets a lot faster over the next few years, I think that will change what we can do with it dramatically. I think it will really make it a lot more useful for a lot of different like third-party app abilities, where right now you do anything on the watch right now, and it takes so long that you're like, well, I might as well take out my phone for that.
Yeah, that's kind of sad that the watch, like, if the watch had come out at an era before, like the iPhone 6 caliber devices that are just so much faster, maybe wouldn't have as much to compare to. But I was going to make the comparison to the iPhone 1. Remember the iPhone 1 came out and it was so responsive, but was it really compared to, I know people do these videos of like, here's an iPhone 1 versus an iPhone 6 and what's more responsive. And they really did do an amazing job at keeping the iPhone 1 responsive, but it seems like they couldn't get that kind of perceived responsiveness in the watch, just because you're always constantly comparing it to your iPhone 6, which is a bazillion times more powerful. And especially WatchKit in the first time doing like the remote app thing, that just made it even worse. So you're right, the watch feels slow. Although when I think of like, oh, the next version of the watch, I know we talked about this at length before, but like, what does the watch need to be as far as I'm concerned, other than software being faster? I want it to be thinner. Like, I know this seems like this should be in Apple's wheelhouse. Like, they're good at making things thinner, right? And inevitably it will be, but as we've discussed many times, maybe not in the next version, right? But eventually it'll be thinner. So we can look forward to the Apple Watch 4 that is thinner and faster. And now we're really starting to talk. And it still doesn't necessarily mean, having spent all this time with this watch and everything, I still am not entirely convinced that there is a way, no matter how fast it was, that there is something useful you can do with the watch that is appy in the same way that phone things are appy. I mostly think of it as, I would like to go near a device or into a room or into a place or at a certain time and have the watch look and behave differently based on that. So I don't have to mess with it. Mostly the thing I do is look at the watch, and when I look at it, because of where I am or what time it is or what has happened somewhere else, it shows me something that is useful, right? Whether it's I sit down in front of my TV and pick up my wrist and I can talk into it to use it as a Siri remote so I don't have to find the remote, or like when it's time to go, if I just look at my watch and it tells me the proactive traffic thing. Like, what I'm getting at is I'm not touching my watch. I'm not swiping on it. I'm not using the digital crown. I'm not pushing buttons. Or even if I'm just pushing buttons, like, like I said, the one interaction that I really like with it is double tap and use it as to do Apple Pay. Because I don't really have to look at the watch then. I can feel for the button, double tap. Like, half the time it's still underneath the sleeve of my coat. I can't even see it, but I still Apple Pay with it, right? So far, that is the most convincing interactions for the watch for me. And I like you, Marco, I'm never like I'm never using that interface with like as if it's a tiny phone, even for like 3 seconds.
No, and I mean, to me, I agree with everything you basically, almost everything you just said. It's like, whenever I'm using the watch, it is mostly about quickly glancing at it for the watch to tell me something. I am hardly ever touching the watch to interact with it on any level, really. And if I am, it's maybe one tap or something. It's, very little. Because if you're going to use the watch for more than about 3 seconds to do anything, it feels like a failure. Like, it feels like, oh, I kind of regret this. I should have gone to my phone for this. Oftentimes, you still need to. I mean, oftentimes, one of the things I like so much about the watch is getting notifications on it. But a lot of times, I have to take out my phone anyway to act on those notifications, or to even, like, read the whole thing or something. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Like, it is nice in theory, and sometimes it really is really nice, but in practice, I have to keep taking my phone out anyway. The more the watch can do faster for you without you touching it or doing anything to it, and if you do need to touch it, the more it can do in very fast response to that touch, the better it is as a product. And it doesn't feel like an app platform in the traditional way at all. It feels like Apple tried to wedge an app platform onto it, and maybe they just didn't realize how it wouldn't really work.
I think you have to give it those capabilities, even if those apps, like all the things we're talking about, could be powered by apps if those apps are given sufficient power. So I think it's kind of like you just have to make the APIs and see if someone, they don't know what's going to be. It's kind of like with the iPhone. You don't know what kind of apps people are going to make. Could Apple have predicted like an Angry Birds style game would be such a big hit because of touch controls and pulling back the little slingshot and everything? You just have to I think it's smart to make it a platform, because whether you can figure out what's going to be the apps that work on it or not, the more capabilities you give people, they'll try everything. The things that don't work, like, it's no skin off your back. Someone tried it, it failed. Like, it's good to have a big open space to experiment. It could be that it ends up that none of those things work. Or it could be that Apple hasn't exposed the right capabilities to the apps. Like, if you can imagine a much more powerful watch that gives apps awareness of, like, where you are, if you're near an Apple TV, or, like, sort of background type processing so that third-party apps could do any of those things that I just described, then third-party apps would have the capability to figure out what people do and don't want from it. And, I think if you don't make it a platform, then it's incumbent on Apple to figure out every possible thing you could do with it useful. If you do make it a platform, everybody can try all sorts of things, most of which will fail, and eventually we'll figure out what it's good for. And I think it was smart to make it a platform, but so far, everything people have tried, including Apple, it's been like, yeah, no, that's not it. Keep trying. The custom complications, I think, was a fairly big success, because those are things that, you glance at and they tell you stuff. But that's a very small success, so we're still kind of waiting.
Yeah.
My update on, by the way, not being a watch person, I just don't like things on my wrist, and like winter has made it worse because now I have like a heavier coat that like kind of interferes with the heavier coat sleeves. And
oh yeah, anything long sleeved is not that pleasant with a watch, to be honest.
And gloves and over it, and like it's just making it more annoying. And so I had a couple of days over the past few weeks where I realized I never looked at my watch. I put it on in the morning to go to work. I took it off when I came home from work, and during the entire time at work, it never vibrated. I never looked at it. I guess I ignored the stand things, or maybe I didn't feel them, or I don't know. And I'm like, why did you even put it on today? Because you didn't look at it. And so now it feels really uncomfortable with a winter jacket and my gloves. And I know I've had days where I haven't looked at it at all. So now a few days I've decided, I'm not wearing it today. So I don't know if I'm slowly again, it doesn't take much to make me not want to wear it, because I am so not a watch person. So that's my new thing now. Now, instead of putting it on every time I remember, sometimes I remember to put it on and I choose not to. So that's, I'm not going to say it's bad for the watch, because again, I was not a watch person, and the Apple Watch did not make me a watch person. I still think it looks nice. I still like wearing it sometimes. If I was going to like go out on the town or walk around the city I would definitely wear it, because I think it would sort of earn its keep then. But for days when I just commute into the office and sit in front of my computer all day and come home, sometimes it doesn't earn its keep.
Yeah, I'm going to see. I mentioned I'm getting a mechanical watch this Christmas, and I'm going to try wearing that day to day for a while and just see, like, I do like having a watch a lot now, but I don't know if I like it just because I like the fashionability and the time aspects of it.
The time aspects, you're staring at, like, you're looking at the upper right of your screen all day. The time is there, unless you're hiding the menu bar in OS 10. You're not doing that, are you?
No, but I'm not always at my computer. I wish I was, but
you aren't. Somehow, I think you're. I always picture you. Where is Marco right now, sitting in front of his computer?
I wish.
Well, you're in line for chicken salad sometimes. I understand.
It's New York. I'm online.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's The reality is, I have a life. I'm up and around. I have a family. I have a house, and I drive to get chicken salad every day. So,
and you need to know what time it is.
Yeah, I'm out around a lot, and I have been totally converted now. I love having the time on my wrist.
So what a great idea. Who thought of that?
Yeah, right? A totally new idea. Yeah. So I love that now, but I'm going to see, because there's also a lot about the Apple Watch I don't really care for, and so I'm going to see, am I a watch person or am I an Apple Watch person? So we'll find out. Anyway, I don't know. Is that it for this week? This has been a weird episode.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thanks so much to our 3 sponsors this week, Backblaze, Casper, and Squarespace, and we'll see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA, Siracusa. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I'm going to assume, Marco, you did not get like a $40 Timex, what is it, Speedmaster, whatever it is that I used to wear.
No.
That would be the more intelligent thing to do if you wanted to just try out wearing a watch.
No, he likes the jewelry. Yes, he's shopping at Tiffany's for things. It's jewelry, and it also, or jewelry, as people tell me I mispronounce it. Maybe that's a Long Island thing too. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, you're mostly shopping for a lot of you're shopping for watches. I find these watches ugly, so you're never going to buy an ugly one. You're going to find one that looks nice to you, and then after that, it's okay, it looks nice, but is it terribly uncomfortable when I wear it, and so on and so forth. But
yeah, and honestly, I have found very few watches of most the big brands like Rolex, Omega. There have been very few of those that I've seen that I've thought I would like that. For whatever reason, most well-respected mechanical watches, just their design aesthetic just does not mesh with me at all. I don't get it. It doesn't do anything for me. A lot of them they seem like they're made for diving. It's there's so many of these well-known mechanical watches that are just made for racing and diving and stuff like that, or boats.
They're not really made for that.
Well, but they all look like that.
Made for people who would like to think of themselves as someone who might go racing or diving, but never actually will.
Right, but then they have all this garbage all over the face, all these, and it's I don't want that. I want something that just looks nice and simple.
It's like the non-functional hood scoop on cars. Everything has a car analogy.
Of course,
it's a hood scoop, but it's not connected to anything. But it's if you had something that needed, to have fresh air forced into it, that might make your engine more powerful. You don't have one of those, but we can put a hole in your hood anyway, and you'll feel cool.
So the watch that I was referring to, the cheapo watch that you should get, is not the Speedmaster. I'm sure I'm going to get angry emails about that. It's the Timex Weekender, and I will put a link into the chat in the show notes. This is what I used to wear, not this exact, not this band, but it was the same face. This is what I used to wear before I got my Apple Watch. It's a delightful, simple, classic watch.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's $25.
I don't like the band.
Oh, the band is no. The band is terrible. I had a different band.
But yeah, the face is nice. It's a nice watch.
So you could try out your newfound love of something else that's expensive and frivolous with this $25 watch. But no, because it's Marco, you're going to get something expensive and frivolous.
That's right.
All those big expensive watches, especially like you said, Casey, the style for men's fancy watches has just been to be just giant hunks of metal. It's I already find anything on my wrist uncomfortable, and you're just going to make it worse by just being filled with really heavy, hard, jagged, lumpy metal. Oh, just just I can't even think about it. And I have thin wrists, and I have weird shaped wrists, and yeah, watches are not for me. I would sooner buy a pocket watch. You know what? I would buy a pocket watch shaped like the Omni, which is another reference you guys don't get. I would buy that, but I would not buy a regular watch.
I mean, we all have our vices, and
yeah.
I guess, Marco, you're in need of another one. Did you figure out headphones now? You figured out coffee, you figured out headphones. Now you need something else to work on?
Well, he's still on the hunt for headphones, never satisfied. It's always, when a new one comes out, he always thinks there's promise. Maybe this will be the one that is lighter than my other headphone, but also sounds as good, but has a better cord that doesn't flake out, but this, but that. Like, it's like me and toasters.